Okay, so we're live.
We are.
We are. If I had my dog, like if I was doing this at home, I'd have to have my dogs locked in another room. Your dogs are so well behaved.
You wait until someone turns up outside.
They go
I
crazy.
think someone's turned up in the vicinity, suddenly they won't be quite so well behaved. They'll be noisy and barky and horrible.
I love it.
Apologies to anybody in advance if they don't like dogs barking, because it's likely to happen over the course of the next however long.
It's like children when you get on that phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to bar of you, and then as soon as you're doing something, they're all over you.
I have a nearly 18-year-old who likes to walk past at midday in his underwear when he's just got up. So
yeah,
apologies in advance.
Yeah. Do you think you'll get back into an office next year?
Yeah, I mean, I was in and out of Surrey Hills yesterday, and yeah, I'll probably go back in maybe a couple of days a week, something like that.
Yeah.
Not too frequently. I quite like the mixture, you know. I can't be at home for too long, but yeah, I like the kind of back and forth. I do need to see people in groups every so often. I'm a bit of an extrovert, and that means I start climbing the walls if I don't have that kind of interaction.
Absolutely.
So we're getting people popping in now. So hello to our audience.
They're coming in. We'll start in a couple of minutes. We'll just allow a few more people to jump on. And then we can start.
Oh, I've just sent that to everybody.
Hi. Perfect. All right.
All right.
Excellent. So you'll see there that Emma just typed in, you can pop in your questions down in the chat box. We've just launched a poll because we'd love to know how advanced you are on your D&I journey so far. Emma is an expert in this area, so it's a really good chance today to ask the questions that you've really wanted to ask in this space. Emma founded talent strategy consultancy Future of Work Australia, a not-for-profit tech community men championing change, and now that was before she embarked on her current venture, Project F. So Project F is a not-for-profit social impact business with big ambitions to make the world a better place. So the charter is to help companies around the world to surface and remove the systemic and structural derailers that cause women to quit tech mid-career. Project F will improve the representation of women participating in technology careers, designing, building, and leading the technology that is powering our world. Now, today is going to be a really good conversation. Emma and I are going to go through a few things, and one of the first things that we're going to talk about is, you know, why gender diversity is so important in technology and leadership. And Em, I'll hand it over to you to talk about that.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, so I think it's a common issue for people in culture having to almost justify why they need to work on this. So the leaders in technology, the chief technology officers and heads of engineering and so on, will be grappling with the lack of gender diversity in their teams. And diversity is generally seen in an organization from the top level as something that is everything. So all diversity, whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's disability, age, gender, LGBT, whatever it is, they will see it as it's not just about gender. So that's something that they get thrown at them quite regularly, I think, is, we're working on all diversity, and especially in the wake of the Black Lives Matter sort of groundswell this last year. There's also been a focus on Indigenous and First Nations diversity efforts. So it's tricky because it's such a huge area, and tech, it's like people go, well, it's just, we can't just focus on tech. But the problem is that all of those areas are a minority. They're all minority groups, but women are not a minority group. They make up over 50% of the population, and yet in technology, they're generally, those teams are, they'll have less than 20% women in them.
Yeah,
it is a problem because, and the CTOs know it's a problem because mixed teams are far more creative. They're better at problem solving. They're faster to innovate. All the things that make technology better and faster. And so you get things. I haven't got my phone on me, but things like phones that don't fit in women's hands or their pockets.
Yeah,
they're designed with very much a homogenous view. You get AI that voice recognition that doesn't recognize women's voices, only men's or certain accents. I was on a conference call last week. It was at a conference doing a panel session. And before we started, we had a background given to all of us to upload. And it was like a plant wall, so all leaves all across this wall and a neon sign on it. And it looked really nice, but one of the panelists was black and we couldn't see her.
Far out.
So, and when she opened her mouth, all you could see was the plants behind. So it was, and she tried all the different parts of her house to make the lighting better, made no difference. We will have to take them off in the end. So things like that still happen. And this is because we don't have, mixed teams. So you're thinking about the future of technology with AI and the advancement of AI and robotics and, everything that's getting more and more automation. These things are going to be more important. So we do need balanced teams. And technology leaders know that. So these are some of the reasons why it's really important. We can't have homogenous teams. The culture suffers. So many things suffer. Companies will be more profitable. They will be more creative. The culture will improve. Performance will improve. There's so many things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are lots of reasons why it's important for gender balance in technology teams. And I think, having that conversation internally about why they need to focus on technology in particular is because they'll be the problem child. All the diversity and inclusion efforts that people and culture will be doing, their initiatives they'll be rolling out, will be having an impact on the business and no doubt will make some good improvements.
Yeah.
What it won't do is solve the problem of the low representation of women in technology because it's such a unique subculture in any organization. And it's understanding that, when you do really understand why it's become such a subculture, you start to understand how the problem needs to be approached. Yeah. Which is different to the other initiatives that they're running. If you're trying to improve the representation of Indigenous people in your organization, if you're in a large company, your approach has to be very focused on that area. If it's, disability, if it's, cognitive, whatever it is, they focus. That's not going to impact your women in technology. The experience of a woman working in a technology environment is very different to the lived work experience of a woman working in a marketing team in your company or HR. And it's understanding why it's different and you need to change that.
That's really interesting. So have you seen it done really well? I'd love an example of where it's been done really well.
I haven't seen it done really well yet. The first company to sign up to program 50/50, which is product, was Canva, and I'm seeing them doing it very well. The impact is not going to be felt for a while because it's a long-term play. But what I'm seeing is they're following the roadmap that we've given them, and they're starting to see some real changes, but it's going to play out over time. So they've I think ThoughtWorks have done a good job. There are certain places like MYOB have done some really good work in this space. But there's not too many that I can say are really doing it well. And that's borne out by the fact that these companies still have such a low representation.
Yeah.
It's not a zero-sum game, you know.
No.
That's often the answer of a leader of a company. You know, when you go up to talk to your leadership team, they'll, you know, quite often be quite dismissive and say, well, it's a zero-sum game. There's just not enough women.
Yeah.
But that's not really, that's not a good enough, it's not a pipeline problem. That's the thing.
No. So like in saying that, what part do the men have to play in all of this?
Well, unfortunately, what we see is that the majority of leadership in these companies is male. So you'll often get, in some cases, you've got a good representation or a good balance in leadership teams, but not very often. So mostly you'll have these leadership teams that are largely male. And when that happens, their perspective obviously is only how they see things. So that's why it's obviously important to have a balanced leadership. But this is where I say, you know, men, these are the people that can make the difference. So 90% of the people that are trying to change this situation are women, but 90% of the people who can make a difference are men. So we kind of have to harness their leadership shadow and their profile and influence them to make and drive the change, which is what Male Champions of Change is doing. I don't know if you're familiar with that group.
Yeah, no, I am.
Liz Broderick started that a few years back, and they're doing some incredible things at a high level sort of policy change across all sectors. So whether it's sports, media, finance, government, they are making an incredible difference. Yeah. I really admire the approach that Liz took when she did this. And I read a book a few years ago called 7 Steps to Leading a Gender Balanced Business, and by Aviva Wittenberg Cox, I think it's her surname. She's awesome. I've seen her speak a couple of times. And when I read that book, so many light bulbs were going off because, you know, it suddenly became so clear that you have to focus on the majority if you're going to achieve any kind of sustainable change. And that's what I started to do. Was I formed this group called Men Championing Change, based on the model that Liz Broderick has in Male Champions of Change, but at grassroots level for technology. So to harness the power of the men who are leading these companies, who want it to be different, and they don't want it to be how it is, but they don't know how to solve it. So it was to give them a safe forum to have the discussions and learn and, you know, share tools and all of that to be able to make change. And it is making a difference. It's not enough, but it is making a difference at grassroots levels in their companies.
It's like a pebble in the water,
yeah.
It's bigger
exactly
and bigger.
Exactly that. The ripple effect.
Yeah.
So yes, it is. Men have a big role to play in this, you know, and we need to lean into them more. Certainly from people and culture need to influence those people to drive that change. You can't influence everybody. That's what I've really learned, is that I used to get quite argumentative with, because people always ask me, what do you do? And I tell them, what's your company do? And I tell them. And they'll always, it's a bit like when you say you're pregnant, people want to just give you their advice.
Yeah, they'll always have a story.
Do this or do that. And people will always share their opinion with me. And obviously there are plenty of people with the opinion that, you know, I don't see gender, or I've never experienced it. I've never seen that happen in my company or whatever. And I've learned not to try and change everybody's minds, because there will always be that percentage of people who will never change their mind and never alter their view. It is.
Yeah. So if you are a D&I person, or you're a technology leader or a HR leader, and you do have, say, leaders or senior or even the CEO that's saying we don't have that problem in our company, how do you elevate the business case?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the best way to do it is with data. because this is how I started back in when I was in people and culture, which I'd been for years, and I found people weren't listening to me. You know, I was just Emma in HR on her soapbox about diversity or something. You know, that was kind of how it was seen, especially in a technology environment. But I realised that if I could engage the CTO and the CEO, they would listen. And engaging them, the only way you can engage people like that is to give them data. So that's what I recommend, is to understand the problem that you're dealing with first. Really understand what the numbers are, know what the numbers are, know what the ramifications are, and you know why these things are important for all the reasons we just talked about.
Yeah.
You know, when you say to a CEO that for every 10% improvement in gender diversity at the leadership level, you get an improvement of 3.5% EBIT.
Wow.
They suddenly go, oh.
Okay. Oh, really? Money.
That's you're talking a lot of money. And that suddenly becomes quite important to them. CEOs need to know why anything they're going to invest in like this, if they're asked to invest in a program or some work that's going to require resource and certainly investment of money to change something, they want to know why is it their burning platform? And if it's not a burning platform, why do we have to do it now? So that's the stuff you need to consider when you're taking your business case. You have to engage with your technology leaders and understand what their problems are. Look at deeper into your engagement scores at you know, the diversity implications. So are women's voices not being heard? Why are they leaving in tech? If your attrition rates are higher in tech, your women will feel isolated in those roles, and when they feel isolated in those roles, you know, it's not an easy environment to be in. And I think that's something to look into your engagement scores to find out and listen to those people.
Yeah.
And these are the things that you can use in your business case. So if you understand what you're trying to achieve with it, what your outcomes are going to look like, you can then start to build a proper business case.
Yeah.
When they recognize the importance and the benefits that can come with having more diverse teams in technology, and the risks associated with not, it can be quite compelling. Competitive advantage is another one that really appeals to leadership. So, you know, when you don't have equal parental leave, for example, you know, we're still working on these things that are from very old school days of having, you know, this primary care or you know, maternity leave, paternity leave. We're now calling it primary care and secondary care, which it makes it more flexible, but we're still saying, you know, I think the average parental leave taken by men in Australia is something like 7 days or something.
Yeah, I think my husband had 5.
It's not good, and we're not supporting women. So basically, and when a woman in tech takes parental leave, when she comes back, it takes her on average 6 years to get back to the level she was at, including pay.
Yeah.
So there are, you know, men's lives don't generally change through the parental leave cycle. Things change dramatically, and there are some graphs that show that you can find that show that journey. And then we wonder why we don't have equality, and we wonder why, you know, women don't go into these or stay in these environments. And we know that 56% of women leave tech for their careers, and they don't leave to have kids. They leave for the same reasons as women without kids. And these are the things that we have to listen into and change.
Do you know what some of those reasons are?
Yeah, the number one reason by a long way is lack of career progression. So they get stuck. And that's all down to the systemic and structural processes that we've set up that work in other areas of the organisation, but they don't work in tech. People are reviewed more on technology output, as an example, and likability to some degree, which I know it's not conscious. This is unconscious bias, but you have in technology where you've got a majority that are male, which is, it is a male dominated environment right now. And we create these very social groups. What we're doing when we do that, without meaning to, is we create in and out groups. So what then happens is you get favoritism, and again, it's not conscious, but it shows up in performance review data. So that's one of the things that we analyze when we work with our customers, is we analyze the performance review data. And you know, it's not intentional, but it happens, and the evidence is there that women are treated differently to men. So women are generally less visible in those environments. And plus the fact that what they're being reviewed on is technical output. And women in those environments tend to pick up a lot more of what we call the glue work. And that also goes against them. They don't get promoted on those things, but other people don't do them, so they do. So this is just a few of the kind of, you know, nuances of the problems and the systemic issues that are taking place that fly under the radar, and why technology needs a different lens over it when you're looking at diversity and how to solve the problems.
Yeah, it's a long-term strategy, isn't it?
It is. If we're going to change it, you know, this is why we're in 2020 and we've still got this problem. When all the computing was done by women back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it was
invented by a woman.
It was invented by, well, yeah, the internet, as they say, was most of it. You've got women behind all of that, but all computing was done by women back then. Men were making hardware. That was the main thing. So that was the really important bit, was making hardware. So they did that and saw computing as being the kind of menial, almost clerical work. And then women were teaching men how to program the first computers. You know, and it was at that point in the 60s that this stereotypical nerdy guy came out of some research that was very skewed research that was done in 1966. And the report was, you know, it was just massively influential on the tech sector for ever after. Basically, we thought this piece of research showed that men were more suited, nerdy men who were socially inept, don't like people, but love maths and puzzles. That's what the social profile said. And so
that's the one that was followed.
And so that's the one that was followed. But if you look at the actual raw data, it was so skewed from the sample that they took to do the research on. And yet, you know, we just created this whole beast of an environment that we've been unable to shake. So, you know, we think of, the best tech environment is going to be one with Nerf guns and arcade games and beanbags and, you know, PlayStations and scooters and whatever. So we've created this around this, you know, nerdy guy. Who loves games, you know, men, children, frat houses, whatever.
It's really interesting.
And it's just not, it's not.
So how do we fix the diversity debt that we've accumulated?
Diversity debt, it's a really tricky thing, because most of these organizations tend to, they start with a group of founders, which is, for the most part, they are men. So, you know, the number of women who get investment in tech is tiny. It's something like 2% of investment goes to female founders. And so you start off with maybe an entrepreneur and a techie person who build a product. And what they typically do unintentionally is build a team of guys doing development. And they don't do it on purpose. It's a land grab of talent to get your product built as quickly as possible and out to market. Because if, you know, you've been invested, you've got these numbers to hit, you've got to scale. So you go, right, who knows who can we get to be a developer? Oh, I've heard about this guy who's so-and-so. And that's what's easy to do. And then before you know it, you know, you blink and you've got a team of, you know, I don't know, 20 engineers, and they're all blokes.
You
need to do that, and you suddenly go, oh shit, you know, how do we reverse that? It's actually quite hard. And then you look at those companies who've left it unchecked and have continued to grow at speed, which a lot of, you know, we've got a very healthy tech ecosystem in Australia. The startup world is booming, and you know, there's a lot of investment. So these companies are growing fast. And the bigger you get, the harder it is to wind back that debt that that diversity debt that you've created. And the only real way to do it is get on with it as quickly as possible. That's the first thing, is to start. And I see that on this poll, which I'll just share those results, it looks like we've got people who are just starting out for the most part, and that's great. They need to just start. They need to, and the ones who haven't started yet, they need to start.
Yeah.
Because it is a long play, and it's a strategic program. It's a strategic thing that you're doing.
Forefront. Yep.
It's not something that you can just plug something in, or a Best Place to Work award is not going to do it for you. Having a great employer brand is not going to do it for you. Putting women on your website is not going to do it for you. There's so much.
Has to be conscious.
Yeah. It's not just about attraction. You've got to look beyond the attraction and the top of funnel, if you like. Oh, that part is important. Don't get me wrong, that's very important. But you do have to look beyond that into the systemic and structural parts of it.
Yeah.
And take
I'd love to hear from the very advanced person.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to hear how they got there.
Oh, Noah, what was the name of the book author? Okay, it was 7 Steps to Leading a Gender Balanced Business. And it was by, her name's Aviva, which is Avivah, I think. And I think it's Wittenberg Cox. That's who I think it is. So if anyone wants to look that up and put that in the chat, that would be helpful. Maybe put a link to it in there. But it's a really good book. Also, if you're up for
Sounds good.
reading, there's another really good book called Invisible Women. Invisible Women is by, I'll just type it in there, Invisible Women.
I think you told me about that one when we were talking.
By Caroline Criado Perez. She's quite, I follow her on Twitter, and she's funny and a bit angry. I find her really quite amusing, and the book makes you angry when you read it. It's a brilliant book. If you love data, you'll love it. If you like, because it's all about the data gap, and how we've created this world.
I'm angry too. Angry. I love that.
Don't read this book then, because you'll get even angrier. Every chapter will make you more angry when you recognize actually how many things are designed in the world around the default male, if you like.
Well, yeah, when you're saying like even bricks and like with the construction industry. So
yeah, so the size of cement bags, are made for what the average man can carry, which means that women generally can't do it. So they only have to make the bags a bit smaller, and women can do it a lot more easily. Things like, and the size of the bricks are made around the average man's hand. Tools, the power tools, all that kind of stuff, are very hard for women to actually hold. For that reason, there's so many things that you just don't think of, and it's all everything. Tech's in there as well. Some of the tech stuff that we talk about. Snow clearing in Norway, how they clear the roads. That stuff. The crash test dummies is another interesting one, where crash test dummies were built by the guys who were doing the work on crash testing back in the day, when they were creating airbags and seatbelts. Yep. And that's probably, I believe it's the number one cause of in utero infantile death. For pregnant mothers, because of it's not been designed for them. It's not been designed for women, and it causes them a lot of damage in this area because it's been designed for men, and it just wasn't thought of.
Yeah.
There's some
that makes me angry.
There's some serious consequences to not having women in these teams, and this is where technology, the future of our world is getting more and more technology driven.
It's very important.
And jobs for women are going to be, I say jobs for women, I mean the majority of work that is subject to automation is going to be, it's being done by women. So we're going to have a lot more women on the job market. So their social security for the future is a threat as well. There's a lot of reasons why this stuff is important. and we
Wow,
can't.
one of our attendees said that there was a company that she heard about that the female technicians got UTIs because there were no toilets provided and the men just went in the bushes. So the women held it in and didn't drink water.
That's terrible.
That's horrendous.
That's horrendous. That's really appalling.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh my God.
Yeah, and that's it. It's a tricky one to navigate because, like I said, this is a subculture in a company. If you work in marketing or HR, finance, or any of that, you're just not going to have an understanding of the experience that women working in technology have. And this is what, there's plenty of real data that shows this. In fact, I pulled out a report earlier that I was referring to recently, which it's an amazing report. And if you want to look it up as part of your business case, it's called, if you go to professionalsaustralia.org.au.
I'll type it in now so that everybody can see it. What is it?
I'm just going to do this now.
Oh, cool.
This report, that link it gives you everything you need for a business case. It talks some of the stats in here. They have a discrimination experience in the workplace. This is very tech specific. Forms of discrimination. Women experience gender discrimination 71.4% and men 0. Age, women 14.3%, men 9.5%.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's really, it's pretty damning stuff, but it gives you a stronger understanding of the problem. And when you've got that, and you've got,
you can fight for it. You can fight for it then if you really understand it. Because because I don't know about you, like I've always worked in organizations where females, and especially being in recruitment, there's a lot of females in recruitment, and being in the HR space, there's a strong female representation. So I haven't felt a lot of these things. There's only one time I have, and a director said to me, you're not going to get the promotion your colleague is because you've just had a baby. So how can you balance that? And that director made it their decision. It wasn't my decision.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever experienced it.
And that's really common. So people, again, we're talking about unconscious bias, not intentional. And we all have unconscious biases, me as well, we all have them. It's recognizing them and checking them, and then putting in place structure to mitigate the risk of those things. There's another good book called, I think of it called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And it's a good leadership book because it gives you an understanding of how to avoid making decisions too fast to the point where it can have a detrimental impact on the people involved.
Yeah.
So we rely on our gut instinct, which is generally biases. So we rely on those things a lot, and they're good for a lot of things, but not when it comes to people decisions.
Yeah, you've got to balance it.
You've got to balance it. And that's where you need to slow down the decision-making process about things like who to promote, who to give a project to, or we rely on just what's the easiest and feels the most comfortable. And reality is that you actually want someone who's probably quite different to you and might seem a less obvious choice. And women who are, most organizations, the majority of people working part-time will be women, because men there may be a stigma around men working part-time.
Yes.
We kind of have this bias perception that men need to provide for their families more so than women. They don't think of women like that. We generally don't think of women like that. We think of men like that. And so we almost assume that women won't want those responsibilities if they've got families. And when they're working part-time, we often, for whatever reason, and that, if you are in HR listening to this, think about reasons people have to give for working part-time. What reason would you say no to? Hopefully there's none. If it's somebody's choice, it's nobody else's business why they want to work part-time. The fact is that we often don't give opportunities to people who are working part-time. So their leadership training, for example, or a program for, emerging leaders or whatever, generally you have to be, we make these rules saying you have to be full-time to go on these courses.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And, it's not even that. You've got to think about what the justification is for those things. And maybe it was relevant 20, 30 plus years ago, but it's not relevant today.
No.
And you struggle to articulate how, why that would be justified. And the same with working part-time. We need to have part-time policies that don't say you have to justify why you want to work part-time. You have to give a reason. You don't. You have to think about the ramifications on the rest of the team.
And how it will fit.
Yeah, and how it would fit. You have to think of the business reasons about it, not personal reasons. That's got nothing to do with anybody. And make sure that those things are communicated to men and women when they first join, and that those things are easily accessible by those people. So everybody, so you don't have to go and ask somebody, can I, how do I go about working part-time? That they can just go and access that information, and encouraging everybody to make use of flexible working, not just the women. Yeah. That we're trying to encourage men and women to share the care responsibility at home, whether that's for parents or children.
Yeah.
Now it's not equal. It's far from equal. And that includes in the tech space.
Yeah. But are there enough women in tech now? Like, are there enough women actually coming into tech? Because it's enough to say, oh, we need, we're going to have a focus on bringing in that diversity. But are there enough women coming into it in the first place?
No. Simple answer, no.
Short answer.
There's a lot of work being done on improving that. The average number of computer science degrees being taken in Australia is 16% by women, is 16%, which is horribly low. And there are reasons for that, mainly sitting around the fact that girls are not nurtured into, so there's a few reasons. Girls are not nurtured into technology through school in the same way that boys are. Also, the culture of the degree has always been quite competitive. So it's about being the best coder. Whereas when the research tells us that when women take a very technical degree of whatever description, whether it's, science, tech, medicine, whatever, they want to learn that so that they can solve real world problems with it. And one of the Sydney universities did a study, including people from some of the biggest tech companies like Google and others, Amazon and so on, where what they figured out was that fact, and they applied it by introducing a double degree. So computer science and something else, whether it be psychology or bioscience tech or something. UI or whatever it was, and the change went from 16% to 29% in 1 year, where for 10 years it had gone from 15 to 16%, so 1% over that time. It's quite incredible when you recognize that something seemingly so simple just hasn't been done, and so it's not really an environment that women enjoy. They often come into it like through another route, which is why all these boot camps are fantastic. Women they go off and do a different degree because they've not been nurtured into that tech, and they stumble upon it later, or they don't do it. They do something else. And I've met an incredible array of women in tech who are developers and architects and so on, who've come from unusual backgrounds. One was a journalist for 7 years and transferred over. She now works at Twitter in San Francisco. She's Australian. She started out with a boot camp a few years ago when she suddenly discovered coding and found she absolutely loved it. Yeah. There's another one who was a patissier. So she was a chocolatier. What do they call them? Confectioner. So she made chocolate. And now she's a developer with Atlassian. And again, went off and did got herself trained. So it's insisting on computer science degrees is also something you have to rethink if that is something company
having
does.
that option for females or for girls.
Yeah, but also the other reason, which I should say, is that there's a lack of role models at the moment in tech for girls. So when you're a girl coming up through your education, you don't get to see these great role models that you can aspire to and think, oh my God, I could be her. That's a great career for me. I'm going to go do that. What you've got is Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and, you know, all of those usual suspects. There are plenty of those role models and the boys go, I could be that. I'm going to go do that. That's a cool career to have. So until we fix the pipeline, the middle of the pipeline, all the holes in the leaky bucket, we're not going to benefit from just chucking more water into it because they'll still fall out of that 56%. So once we've figured that stuff out, which we know is a long-term strategic play, it will be a better environment for women. And more women going through, making it through into leadership roles and leading companies, that the girls will be able to see role models and they'll start to go, oh, I could do that. I could see myself doing that.
There's some really cool tech for kids that you can get with coding. So for their STEM at school. And you've just inspired me. I might get something for my 4-year-old daughter for Christmas because they do it and her brother can help her.
It's awesome.
But she's little, he's bigger, so they can do it
There's
together.
some great things out there. The boot camps, somebody's asking about boot camps. We have General Assembly. We have a Coder Academy. We have Academy XI. We've got lots of great boot camps out there. There's also Code Like a Girl, which is a Melbourne-based organisation, social enterprise. They are doing amazing things. There's Muses Code JS, which is not just for girls, it's for it's for women of any age doing anything to go learn.
What's it called?
Muses Code JS, JS for JavaScript. So Muses Code JS, yeah, that's Code Like a Girl, General Assembly, Code Academy, and Academy XI is another one. Yeah, there's quite a few. So there's lots of awesome ones. The other thing is there's a book, what's it called? It's for women in tech who want to, they feel like they're imposters because they don't know the computer science fundamentals. And it's really helpful for them to, if they want to be hired by people like Google, or Amazon or Canva or places like that, they need the fundamentals. Now, it's called something like the Imposter's Handbook or something. I'll have to look that up. I can share it.
That's all right, and we can send it out later.
I think it's called Imposter's Handbook or something like that. Anyway, it gives you a really easy, digestible version of computer science fundamentals to be able to go and ace those interviews and not feel like an imposter.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really good. Something's Handbook.
Okay. So I think that, well, there's been a few questions that have come in. So are we ready to answer those, Em?
Yeah. Why not?
So our companies say they value diversity, but we've hardly any women in our tech department and there's no budget to improve it. How can we prove the return on investment so they'll give us a budget?
Yeah, so that goes back to my
data.
The data thing. I think really provide data, but also, you know, the value question. So if you've got a set of company values, it helps to when you've got a description of company values, find something in there. Because if you're putting job descriptions out there saying we value diversity and inclusion and diverse perspectives and, you know, all our people and where's the value? Yeah, that's the pushback is, you know, how are we demonstrating that we value these things?
Yeah.
Are we demonstrating it? And if the one good way to do that authentically is quite simple, and it's about having one of your values that actually demonstrates that. And when you have a value that clearly states we value these things, so say you've got 4, 5, 6 values, whatever, find one of those. If it doesn't say we value everybody or whatever, find one that's most closely linked and build that into that value. Then you can use that to weave that through other parts of the organization, like your hiring. If you're hiring, you're looking for evidence of alignment to values. If you are, because you don't want to keep hiring people who don't value diversity of perspective, who don't get it, don't see it, and don't care about it. If you say you do it, then you have to start measuring people on that when you're hiring and when you're doing performance management, performance reviews. You can even do awards on values, which a lot of people do. They have these, quarterly awards or whatever, where you can nominate people on the lived demonstration of whichever values they are, and that starts to get people actually living them, those values. I think that's important. But other than that, I think it really is about understanding the problem, understanding the benefits of having this sort of gender diversity in technology for the future, on the level of maturity your company is at. So where is it on the maturity scale, and where you need it to be, and how you could get there. Those are the things you need to really get to grips with.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our attendees has said to make sure that obviously the recruitment strategy is to proactively connect with some of the boot camps, university groups, other meetup groups. And I think it's really important, if you're using a specialist agency as well, to make sure that they've got the same values as you, because if they don't value it, they're not going to provide people that that are coming from a diverse background. So I think that's really important too.
Correct. Yeah. If you're working with external, that's another really good thing you can do if you get to do some kind of investment. If you get sign off to do some work on this, is looking at your supply chain. Having a supply chain that can demonstrate a value of diversity and inclusion in their own organization, and giving them, asking to see their diversity and inclusion policy, asking what their representation of women is in their technology team, and across an entire organization, that kind of stuff. That can really
and it'll spark them thinking about it too.
Exactly. So you're then having an influence. So there are quite a few companies starting to do that now. And if you look up, there's a company called Elect. Elect. It's Sandra D'Souza is the founder. And it's a place that you can go and find ethical suppliers and gender balanced suppliers as well.
Cool. Another question that's come through. So we've invested a lot in using Work 180, but it didn't work for us.
Sorry.
What else can we do?
Told you. So Work 180 is a job board. So you can use them for probably more broad recruiting. It could be quite expensive for that unless you're hiring en masse or your volume in maybe, more blue collar or retail or, things like that where you want diversity. But for tech, I'm not sure that it's quite as effective. And it's endorsing, so it's an endorsement tool. It's a branding tool. So if you want employer branding, I think it can be quite useful for that. But for something like what we're talking about here, it's more about solving the real problems. So you have to remove the branding part. It's not you're not window dressing. Window dressing is not going to solve your problem, basically. So I'd say it's
a band-aid.
Yeah, if you're going to invest in something, don't look at branding. Branding is important. So your employer value proposition is where you want to probably invest if you're going to look at branding. But that goes beyond an endorsement for ticking boxes of policies and things.
Absolutely.
Because that's not important and also understanding what's important for women in tech is different to everybody else. Women in tech have a different set of priorities. The number one priority for women in tech is equal pay. It's being paid fairly. So, invest in doing an audit on your pay and making transparent your pay ranges. So not what people are getting paid, making transparent about what you pay people in technology, and that will be a much better investment for your money than something like that essentially is a badge that says, aren't we great?
We're amazing.
And we've got lots of women.
And then I think there's a couple of comments from someone personally. I think women need to create a whole new level of role model for other women. And for me, I hate seeing people strive to be included in the flawed, failed mess that men ruling the world has created for other women and men. So yeah, that's so true.
They do. I think you're right that women, we don't help each other enough. We don't support each other or amplify each other's work enough. I mean, I've started doing that a lot more than I ever used to, just because I recognize the value of it. And, we should be lifting each other up, and when we do well, we've got to throw a net down for lots of other women to come up behind us. It's a very important point, actually. There's a book, I'm all about books today.
You are. We're going to have to send out the book list.
I know, I have to do a book list. There's a book called Womankind, and it's by Dr. Kirsten Ferguson. It's fantastic. Yes, somebody's put Sheo. Sheo is awesome. Dr. Kirsten Ferguson co-wrote this book with Catherine Fox after she got sick and tired of seeing some of the trolling the vicious trolling of women that was going on Twitter. And so they she did this campaign called Celebrating Women. So it's #Celebrating Women. And it went viral at the time, a couple of years ago, all through Twitterverse. And she was basically promoting or lifting up and celebrating, I think it was at least 2 women a day for an entire year or something like that. She started, the first one was her own mother, and she didn't say it was her mother, she just did it. And it was random women from wherever. It was fantastic. And the book is an absolute delight. It's all about women supporting other women.
Is it Radically Generous Women? One of our attendees.
No, it's that book. No, it's called
Womankind.
There is one called Radically Generous Women. Oh, that's Sheo. Right. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, no.
It's really cool. And last but not least, I just have one question left.
Yeah.
Do you recommend, and I think we touched on it earlier, do you recommend targeting our recruitment agencies on balanced shortlists?
It's a tricky one because you can do that, but you have to give them time you have to give them lead time. I don't think it's fair to do that without proper planning. So I think if you're going to say to your agencies, you have to understand how an agency operates to start with, that their own business model is not like your internal recruitment team. They have their revenue targeted. So if they're not going to get that hire for 3 months, they have to be, they can do that, but they have to be able to plan that. So saying to someone, right, here's a role and we want a balanced shortlist by next Friday is not realistic. You have to work with that partner, with that recruiting partner very closely.
Yeah.
And support them as a partner, not just as some recruiter. Don't set them up against other recruiters. This is, I've done a lot of
this. Is 101.
This is 101. This is, it just makes real sense when you think about it. I think most people, or a lot of people, will assume that recruiters are all like estate agents, and that, you've got to treat them badly, keep them at arm's length. But the reality is if you find a good recruiter, it's like a good hairdresser. You kind of don't want to lose them. You'll follow them everywhere. Because there are some that are incredibly good and worth their weight in gold. And they are your eyes and ears in the market. They're your employer branding. They're all those things. But you have to keep them close and help them to do the best job possible, because you're going to pay them a lot of money at the end of it.
Exactly. And they'll put a lot into it. They'll put their heart and soul into it.
Yeah, and they recognise, if they're good, they recognise the privilege of doing that, of spending of taking your hard-earned money. And so should you. So, give it the focus that it needs. And that means, proper planning. Just say, okay, if it takes you 3 months to find me women for this role, take 3 months, but know that I am going to hire this role in that, at that point, and be be okay, because otherwise, the pressure is on to fill the seat too fast, and it's just, you have to do a lot of work to go find those women. You've got to give your recruiter the ability to build that pipeline for you and to keep doing that over time, so they can add value in that way.
Yeah. And as a recruiter, or even talking to hiring managers, is another question's come through actually that I think is quite important, is how you can influence them, and rather than taking the traditional approach of having to hire women from large enterprise, how do you influence them to recruit an up and coming, say from the boot camps or those types of areas?
It's a strategy discussion about the future. So it's about strategy and innovation. So if you have a session with these hiring managers, you can probably get them to come up with the answers you want from them, which is the question is about the future. So what are the skills of the future that we're going to need? You can ask them that, they'll know, and it will be stuff that, they're struggling to find people with now, and they're thinking about the future. It could be that, they're thinking they're going to need to build some kind of a machine learning team or whatever it is. And if those skills that the whole country is short of, if they're not around, you've got to start, you have a responsibility to seed that future, to be part of that. And that can be sponsorships, that can be hiring a number of graduates, it can be hiring a number of people on a track out of these boot camps over time, and having the ability in your own teams to be able to foster that growth. But they can probably come to that answer, without you having to give it to them. I've done that before, and it works quite well.
I love that.
And also having some really good case studies. And one I will tell you to look at is Amy Simmons. I'm sure she won't mind. We hired her out when I was at Ansarada, and I was head of talent there. She was hired on the same day I started, and she came from General Assembly, and she was at ABC before that doing journalism. And I remember her coming to me almost in tears after a few weeks, saying, I think I was hired just because I'm a girl. And it was no, that's not what happened. And the difference she made to an all-male team was incredible. Just that perspective, the culture was improved dramatically from being, pretty toxic, being really quite a pleasant environment to work. And a lot of the guys really appreciated it. She brought in pair programming because the old boss didn't like pair programming. She was like, well, why? I love pair programming. And they started doing it, and everybody else loved it, and off they went. So many things. And she's now at Twitter, I think it's Twitter, not Facebook, Twitter. Twitter. I
think she's the one in San Francisco. She's the one that you referred to earlier.
Go to some of those boot camp general managers and ask them for a few case studies. They'll know people that they've had hired who've gone on to do amazing things, and I'm sure they'll be happy to give you some of those examples that you can then use.
It's good advice, because we've placed a few heads of HR into tech startups recently, and the biggest problem they have is that they develop these people and then they actually get poached by the bigger guys, and they offer them another $40,000.
Yeah.
So to know that there's pipeline coming up through, it's really important.
But one thing, I guess before we wrap up, I want to just leave you with is, if your company's a good way to start your influencing is to show them how the land lies in your organization. If you go to our website, Project Tech website, there is a free gender balanced health check you can take. It takes about 5 minutes, 6 minutes max. As long as you know the composition of your tech teams, that's all you need to know in terms of numbers, which any HR ops system should be able to show you. If you're smaller than, if you've only got 25 people in there, then that should be easy to do, count on a couple of hands. Just complete that and you will get a very nice report, which will come back pretty quickly. And it gives you some benchmarks data in there, and it gives you a view of how you are overall, what your tech looks like in reality in terms of gender balance. And it's a nice document that you can use as a conversation starter for a discussion around diversity and inclusion in technology.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that today. There's lots of seeds of hope. So thank you very much, and you're doing great work. So thank you.
I really
And
enjoyed
thanks for everybody attending. We'll send through a book list as well, so that will be there for you because there's lots of good resources.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Welcome.